Hey team, let's check out our 2025 financial recap for the old Infield Hits eBay business, mostly eBay, I should say. And really, what I'm proud of in 2025, I hit a revenue goal that I wanted to hit. That was $20,000 in revenue for the side business, the side hustle, selling sports cards here on the internet. And then, secondly, I wanted to fund my personal collection entirely with gains from selling cards at a profit. And so we barely got there. We just snuck by here at the end of the year. This is my financial dashboard. I built this custom for my business. Pretty fun. I'll be talking through that today, just sharing the results and some stories along the way about kind of the hustle of doing this as a side hobby, but treating it as a business as well. And with that, I should make the disclaimer. First of all, none of this is financial advice. Second of all, I am not a certified public accountant. And third of all, these numbers aren't final or being submitted to the IRS. This is not my tax return. In fact, there's probably a couple of loose screws in the back that I'll just tidy up and ultimately pass along to a CPA when I file my taxes. And yes, I do file taxes on all of this. Not only do I make enough from these different platforms to get tax forms, but that doesn't really matter. I'm treating this as a business, so I do file the taxes, whether or not I hit those thresholds that the IRS is required to send forms, because I'm kind of like a contractor for eBay, if you think of it that way. So we'll talk through some things. If I misspeak on anything, again, I'm just going to fall back on the fact that I'm putting this out there for your viewing pleasure and not getting paid for this. So who the heck cares? But if I get anything wrong, let's chat about it in the comments. I mean, there's a lot of terminology, everything from cash to accrual accounting to cost of goods sold. I'm not trying to do a crash course in teaching that, but it's really important when analyzing your business performance. But anyways, enough preamble. Let's get to it. Jumping down, we're actually going to start with this ugly kind of tax info section. This is where I do all of those calculations. And we're clocking in for the year 2025 just over that $20,000 revenue mark, which was the goal I had set at the beginning of the year. So really cool, really had a good push in December to hit this number. There's nothing too special about this. I mean, honestly, 19,000 compared to 20,000. I'm not trying to put food on the table with this money, so who really cares? But in terms of challenging myself, and you can see here, here's my monthly this is a profit chart, but you can see the volume here at the end. Really, to get to that number was really fun. And then as far as cost of goods sold, calling this an estimate, but it's probably pretty darn close to actually where I was. And this formula is important. It's really important because let's say on December 31st that I bought, a big lot of inventory right at the end of the year. Well, I wouldn't even have a chance to sell that. It's probably not going to arrive in my mailbox until this year, January, the 5th or something like that. And so it really doesn't make sense to include that when analyzing business performance. It really only makes sense to track profit on what I've actually sold. And this is important because in some accounting methods, you're not even able to write off your cost of inventory until it's sold. And so if you get a bunch of inventory, it's not that's immediately deductible. Again, not the point of this video, but there's some nuance here. In any case, the number that I called an estimate, it's going to be pretty darn close to what ends up on my tax forms, but spent about $9,300 on inventory that was sold in 2025. So this includes the stuff I had on January 1st, 2025 coming in from previous years, everything I bought in 2025, and then also I had to look at my inventory on December 31st to kind of make this calculation. So practically speaking, spent $9,300 on the inventory that was sold in 2025. All of this tallies to a gross profit of 54%. And cool. Most people don't really think in terms of gross profit. And when you're selling sports cards on the internet, especially at the low end piece, you're going to have a lot of operating expenses. Think about postage, fees, and those can really take a big bite into your margins. And so gross profit just isn't as practical for my type of work, but maybe the silver lining here is, hey, I'm selling stuff for more than I'm buying it for. I spent $9,300 on cards that were sold and got $20,000 in revenue. So really cool there. Almost a 2x, just about 2x margin, which is convenient for thinking about things. But operating costs, this includes shipping, postage, your eBay store subscription, supplies, all of that factors into operating cost, what it actually costs to run the business. Best I can tell, my overhead rate, so this is the stuff that isn't directly tied to each individual shipment. In theory, you can kind of track a lot of the stuff to individual shipments, like fees, eBay fees, stuff like that. And so that to me is not an overhead expense. That's a direct cost incurred on your sales, on what's going out the door. And then your overhead is going to be that stuff that, PSA membership, eBay store subscription, shipping that you can't directly tie to individual orders, stuff like that. So about a 6% rate, basically 6% of my revenue was going just to operating the business. And all told, I think that's a decent number for a low budget operation here in the home office, and, really trying to keep overhead expenses to a minimum. And then adjustments on those, really these are just like refunds on like canceled orders and such. So that knocked me up a bit, very small percentage of everything. And really the number that we all care about here is net profit. So after all of your cost of goods sold and your operating expenses, clocking in with just over $3,300 in cold hard profit on what was sold, and that's about a 16.6% rate, which I think an okay validation is that's pretty consistent with a healthy enough retail operation. I wish mine was a little higher just because I'm small batch and I'm not trying to run a major corporation or retail store, but you get the point. So in any case, the other thing to consider, because this is kind of like a separate line item, is beyond this profit on what was sold, I gained in all of this about $888 in new inventory across the year. So basically the inventory I came into 2025 with went up by $888 over the course of the year. So that's kind of viewed as an asset, not something I've written off yet. And so that what that means is, based on what I had going into last year and such, ending the year on my desk at midnight on New Year's Day, 2026, I had close to $1,700 worth of inventory, basically what I paid for the cards on my desk, ready to sell going into 2026. Now, this is all important and probably the most practical and sensible for analyzing your own performance, but cash flow is really, really important, because if you don't have the money, you can't buy anything. And so the other thing I try to track is, what is my actual cash flow for the business, only considering business expenses. We're about to get to the personal collection piece that I hinted at, but I got this much cash in. My cash out is going to be, I spent about $18,000 on everything all in. That includes grading, inventory, even if I haven't sold it yet, etc. So my cash stance on the business went up $2,300, even though my profit was higher than that. And that's because of that remaining inventory piece and some other, kind of nickels and dimes that that factor into that equation there. So cash went up $2,300. And again, my goal here is I'm trying to self-fund my hobby. And I probably actually spent more on my own personal cards than I wanted to in 2025. But it's okay. I had a lot of fun doing it. And all told, I spent about $2,600 on cards. That also includes grading expenses for cards that I'm going to keep and not sell. But basically anything that I bought without the intention of reselling, spent $2,600. Along the course of the way, I got some credit card rewards that factored in for these purchases. And so I allocated all of that money that came in, I think 3% back on online purchases towards my personal collection. So where does that land us? Well, it lands us at overall my bank account for this thing. I have kind of my own account for all of this card stuff. It went up plus $76, which means I funded absolutely everything with my hobby gains, which is awesome. That's exactly what I need to tell my wife and show her the numbers, because if I wasn't doing this, we'd probably have a problem. So I set out on this quest a few years ago when I really got into reselling stuff, using data and analysis to make things more efficient. And so my goal every year is to cover my expenses, and I just barely did that. I'll talk about some limits to this number here in a second, because this, while all done legally and ethically, I did defer a couple of payments, or not even defer. I have some predicted payments coming up or that have already hit in early January that make my 2025 numbers meet this goal, which is totally fine, but we'll talk about that here in a second. So if you boil it all down, I basically spent a bunch of time to run my eBay shop to get $76 in cash, $2,600 worth of cards for my personal collection, and $888 worth of new inventory. That's really what I gained, what I returned to the business and to my hobby in 2025. And so this tangible value, very simple calculation, is just $3,500, adding all that up. So plus $3,500 in terms of new inventory, personal collection, and net cash after deducting both the business and the personal expenses. So let's get to it. You can see here I had a big climb towards the end of the year. One thing I'll point out is the cash accounting method, which is probably the most realistic thing to do for a small business. That's what most people advise. You can see these big jumps up here. Well, that corresponds with the eBay payout of every 2 weeks I get paid. This was really helpful for me because December was actually a quote-unquote 3 paycheck month, including the last one, which was on the last Tuesday. I think I get paid out every other Tuesday. It was either the 30th or the 31st. I think the 30th based on this chart here. So this big jump really is what paid me out. And you can see here in December, I netted $1,300 to the business, $1,315.06. So real strong push both to hit that revenue number and to hit the funding my personal expenses. So very cool. But one of the more, so this is important because you need cash. I already mentioned that. But the other way to think about this is accrual. And even if you don't report your numbers this way to the IRS, I think this is a helpful way to think about it, because if you trust that you have cash to cover everything, you can kind of make informed, calculated decisions on what to do. And basically, if you pivot everything on the transaction date, so you can imagine if you get paid out by eBay every 2 weeks, you might have a sale every day between those 2 weeks. So you might have 14 days of sales that build up to then ultimately cash out on one of those paydays, like so. But you can kind of think of it in an accrual sense where it's like, okay, each day I'm going to have different sales. And this is kind of a more realistic picture of what my business actually feels like, where it's like, okay, just ho-hum, just moving along, not doing anything too crazy. Oh, I'm going to have a decent purchase here, a decent purchase here. Oh, I just made a big sale, big few sales, had a big sprint there, massive purchase here, massive purchase here, massive purchase here. That's kind of maybe a more intuitive way to think about things, even if it isn't necessarily recommended for tax purposes for a small business. And so at the end of the day, these numbers are really close, especially in 2025 when I did get paid out there at the end of the year. So just slight differences there, and in the month-by-month results might look a little bit different because, for instance, in this month, May, it looks like I had a really good month. I'm going to guess I actually did most of this work to get paid out in April or so. And so let's just see here if these toggles, it toggles a little bit. So maybe my gut thought is a little bit wrong, but you can see that your work and when you get paid out differs a little bit. And it kind of matters how you think about things to define if you're succeeding or not. Anyways, let's jump to revenue. Let's talk about these. So pretty stable here. $1,500 a month is, pretty average or so. You can see hovering around there with a few big months. I like breaking it down by understanding the item, subtotal, and shipping. I have a strong bias towards eBay standard envelope where I typically don't charge shipping and handling, which is a form of revenue. But here at the end, I was shipping off a bunch of player lots as part of consignment selling for a buddy of mine who gave me a ton of his cards. I would break them into lots, and so you can see bigger chunk on shipping and handling in the month of December. And on that note on consignment, one of the things that helped my numbers was in this consignment agreement I have with my buddy, I sold his stuff, but I don't have to pay him out. I didn't have to pay him out until January. And so a lot of these revenue numbers didn't even have a cost with them because it wasn't my inventory. And that's another thing that helped me reach my goals as far as funding the hobby year over year. Again, I still have to pay it, but if you just choose the arbitrary January 1st to December 31st, a couple of those games you can play, or really business arrangements you can play to defer cost if you have that flexibility, which I did in this case doing consignment. As far as biggest sales of the year, you can kind of get a feel for my sales. Of course, we love sales over $100. Those are fun. A bunch of Topps Gold, sold those. That was my biggest sale of the year way back in March. A couple of Trout rookies. Derek Jeter autographed card, which I had pulled from a pack in 2008. Went around and graded it, graded a 9, and it sold at a high price in my opinion. Really wasn't itching to let this go, but I saw this offer and said, I'm going to have to take that. And then a few more that maybe I regret selling, but Jose Altuve, PSA 9 Gold. Kind of wish I had that one, but I thought I got a good price on it. Freddie Freeman, PSA 9 Gold. Again, another one. Kind of wish it was still in the personal collection, but hey, that's how it goes. Maybe I'll get another one at some point. So these were the best sales as far as revenue goes. And you can see that being over $100 is where you want to be. Of course, if I just sort by date, you can see this is maybe a more realistic snapshot. This is stuff that I sold just in the last week of the year, but $3, $4, or $5. It's all stuff I wanted to increase. One thing you can do to kind of see that, let's see if it's on here, but you can actually find a average cost per item sold, which eBay is where I do most of my business, so it's a good way to do it. If I just go to, let's say, last year compared to prior year, we're going to see if this went up. Did my average amount per sale go up in 2025? Well, look at this, $8.74. That was an 80% increase from 2024. So that is awesome. That is exactly what I wanted to do. So average sales price went way up, and technically my quantity sold went down by 1%. So that's perfect because I'm doing the same amount of work in theory to get 80% more revenue, which is awesome. So that checks out. And you can see here, this is kind of a smattering of gross sale, these things kind of ticking in the up direction, which is what we want. As far as costs, let's take a look at this breakdown. See, I really kind of went on a spending freeze at the end of the year on the business expenses. We'll get to see this in a second, but my personal collection saw a big uptick in November, in December. And in terms of how I spent my money this year, next year I'll probably beef this up to give some more visuals, but about $10,000 plus on cost of goods. This includes sold and unsold. So really cost of inventory is the way to think about it. This is including boxes. Some boxes I would open and sell the contents. Terrible idea financially, but it's kind of fun. And then I did actually buy some sealed products and resell those. Probably at a wash at the end of the day, but it was something new I was trying out. Lots of cards, concert posters, another thing that I funnel into my business from time to time. Singles, which it makes sense, singles versus lots. You're going to get better deals on lots. So nothing too surprising there. And then consignment. I paid out my buddy $253 over the course of the year selling cards on his behalf. Overhead's also important. We have admission. So this was to, I think, a card show I went to back in February. Other fees, that includes grading, eBay store subscription, marketing fees, etc., and then supplies, which honestly I'm kind of surprised at how low this number is as in accordance with the rest of my business spend. Kind of surprised on that. So about $1,800, just under, on overhead cost spent in 2025. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the Project Explorer. This is really fun because I mentioned opening boxes is a terrible idea. Check this out. Well, I bought a case of 2025 Topps Heritage. First time ever opening a case. Something I wanted to do. It was a business goal for 2025 to do this. I had fun, but absolutely terrible decision. Just to cut to the bottom line, it's as if I burned $1,000 of cash just to perform this exercise and do work selling this stuff. And at the end of the day, I kept for myself a complete base set, a partial short print set, because you can't even get the full darn short print set of 100 cards breaking a case. I got like 76, 77 of them, which is wild. And maybe like 2 cards. Like I literally sold everything else. So if you ever want to see the mechanics of a case break, yeah, I got $1,000 in revenue. Factor in the fees. I had 213 orders on this stuff. So if you just average out shipping for those, I probably spent $263 on that. Probably spent close to $40 on supplies. Made this after the fees and everything. And the case was almost $1,600. I sold everything except for the stuff that I mentioned that I kept. The best sale in this whole case was $42.49 plus shipping. Not what you want. So if this is any indication, again, this is one data point, right? People break boxes and cards all the time, more than I do. But burned $1,000. I could have bought all this stuff way, way cheaper. So that was one example of a low light. Let's talk about Topps Gold though. Topps Gold bottom line cash flow is like plus $1,900. Good revenue. And you can see here just some of the totals. My strategy with these is buy lots, sell them individually. A lot of them are going to be low end, but you'll have a couple of these winners at the top. And then you can sell the lots of cards kind of at a similar rate to what you bought them. And so basically everything you upsell or everything that you sell at a gain is the pure profit once you factor in the overhead stuff to get these things out the door. So pretty pleased with that. Let's go ahead and look at another one here. What's a good one? Orange Star Parallels. This is an interesting one. I bought a complete set of Orange Star Parallels. I want to say in like November, maybe October. Heck, let's see it would have been October because my first sale was about a week later. And so far, I've sold maybe 100 of them or so. Let's just do some quick math. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 15 times 4. Let's say I've sold 60 of them. I've sold 60 of these things. I can show you the highest one's been Spencer Strider. So I have like 600 of these left, and right now my net cash is about negative 917. Here is where I could get more developed in terms of looking at inventory that I have, but this is something I'm not upset about just yet because I have 13 or so of these out at PSA for grading right now. I'm expecting those to sell at a much higher rate here once I get hopefully good grades back. And so this negative is not as frightening as the Topps Heritage. The Topps Heritage case, I've pretty much sold everything. This one, I have not. And so this number is not as intimidating, and I kind of predicted a slower sales cycle on these because people don't know what they are. So in any case, that's just an example of like late year inventory where I still have a lot left. 53 orders. You can see there might be a couple multi-card orders in there, but it's a complete set. I got over 600 cards left still to sell. So not as worried about that. What next? What's another one we could do? Guess we could check out Vintage. Didn't do as much on Vintage this year. You can see spent $166 on Vintage cards and sent those off for grading and did, I would say, just okay. Expected results, but selling some older vintage from prior years did pretty well in this category as well. So I think it'd be fun to add some. Well, let's talk about one more here. This is kind of a lesson on trying out new things, but Costco. Costco was having these Tops bundles, so they would have some unopened product. And so I ended up spending over $1,100 on these. And if you factor in everything, lost about $64, which at the end of the day, who really cares? It's really not much. But you can see here, selling some sealed boxes. This is one of those times where, you see a good deal, and I'm buying all this online. Like this isn't even scalping or anything. It's just pure resell. It's like, hey, I see these at this price. I'm going to list them. I probably could have held out for a few more bucks or waited a little bit longer. But you can see here, had a range of prices on these sealed products. And at the end of the day, I actually opened one of them. So I opened one of the boxes, and now that I look at it, if I would have sold that one instead of opening it, probably would have ended up positively. So that's maybe another indication that you shouldn't open packs if you're trying to make money. So future version of this, hopefully I will add some charts and data and other stuff, some visualizations, I should say, to this tab to understand what's going on. But all told, good spot check of different projects. That way you can really understand if you are doing things well, if you're doing things sustainably. All right, last thing, then I will be quiet and end the video, but let's go ahead and look at the personal collection. This is all the stuff I bought for myself in 2025. And heck, maybe let's start from the bottom, but man, I love low-end stuff, and you can imagine it's much easier to pay off your personal collection when you're buying cards for $1.36, $1.57, and so on. And you can see these notes here. I really enjoy getting autographs in person. Nothing better than buying a cheap card and having Sean Bouchard sign it. So try to include some notes. I'm not totally religious on this in terms of doing it every time, but I probably do. This is probably pretty accurate. And so you can see in these notes here just about how many that I've been able to get signed. And a lot of these I've just bought recently. So if you look at some of the dates, like Christmas, I haven't had a chance to get that signed. So maybe next year if we look back, I'll kind of show that. So a lot more here, which is fun. That's kind of what we're looking at in terms of stuff I bought at the low end. In terms of the big boys, the stuff in the personal collection, or at least spent for the personal collection. Heck, I got to go back to the first page, don't I? Biggest one was a Superfractor, first ever Superfractor. Ended up trading Brenton Doyle for a signed bat. So this is still considered a personal expense. Thank you. I got something in return. So I have that signed bat here in the downstairs office. Really cool to do that transaction. I spent $291 on a Mike Trout rookie card. That's the personal portion. The other two I resold, but I kept this one. I even counted in going to Rockies Fest, which was $120. This is kind of arguable as a, maybe you just don't even consider part of this the hobby. You can just pay for this out of pocket, just as a spectator, as an event. But I like to include this because I was able to get a lot of autographs there last year. And as you can see, a lot of my interest are in the autograph camp. Still waiting on this one back. Haven't gotten Nolan Ryan to return a submission I had back in October. So that'll be a nice one to get back into the PC for 2026. But really niche taste, grading expenses. This is the other thing I'll count towards a personal collection expense if it's for something I don't plan to resell. So got 2 cards of Paul McBeth, disc golfer, and those grading expenses all track towards that personal collection budget. So I'm a low-end guy. I think I'll spend less and have fewer transactions on myself in 2026. That is what I would predict, because honestly, I'm getting too many cards. You can see too many blank notes columns, stuff that I really should be getting signed. And then complete sets. I've also been buying those up, which is kind of fun. So there you have it. That's my 2025 numbers. Really excited to hit that revenue goal of $20,000. Really excited to pay off all that personal collection stuff. And most importantly, didn't have to ask my wife for a loan at any point. I was able to self-sustain, use the account, sell some stuff. We got close at a few times. Close to the negative a few times, but didn't have to do it. So that's the goal. If you're interested in doing that, I love talking shop with folks who are similarly minded. Yeah, appreciate you checking in and enjoying this video. We will catch you at the next one. Take care. See ya.